Hi, everybody, welcome to the Despots Tribunal, and yeah, thanks for watching. So first things first, this is totally demonetized, so you don't need to worry about any ad breaks. And if you just want to navigate your way around, there's timestamps in the description, and you can navigate to the topics that are of interest to you. All right, so first thing, I just want to mention briefly that the Worst of Woke Awards are going to be on probably February 10th. It's quite long. It's longer than I thought it would be. I knew it would be longer than last year, but it's turning out quite a bit longer than that. So it'll be probably around an hour and a half long, and that'll be out on February 10th. And thank you to everyone who has commented and voted and taken the time to let me know which productions of the year you think are the worst in the many different categories that I've put up. All right. So I'm going to be, me and my guest are going to be discussing Echo, the Marvels, what's wrong with female characters today, our 5 worst Marvel characters, Tetris and Air. I don't know if we'll get through all of that, but we'll get through most of it anyway. And like I said, if you want to navigate around, the timestamps are there. Okay, so I'm going to welcome my guest now, which is my favorite YouTube channel that I've come across recently in movie and TV, and it is NerdWord. So yeah, let's welcome her to the chat. How's it going,
Hi,
NerdWord?
everyone. Good. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks.
Good.
All right, I enjoyed your last video on the worst characters, or was it the worst female characters of the year?
Yeah. Yeah. It was the worst female characters of the year because I was looking back at 2023 and I realized it has been a doozy of a year for my gender and I can't stand it and I have to talk about it. So, yeah.
Yeah, although I don't know if at this stage there's really a difference between the worst female characters and the worst characters. It seems like all the worst now are women.
Yeah, we are in the running for that, aren't we? And it's very, very frustrating. It is. Yeah, because all the male characters that I've used to look up to are now either idiots, losers, or deadbeats, or some combination of all three. And then all the girls are just these generic female girl bosses who lack any and all femininity and any sort of nuance to their character. And it's very frustrating because A, I can't relate to any of them, and B, they're just annoying to listen to with their stoic expressions and their complete detachment from anything and any sort of human emotion. It's like they're robots all the time.
Yeah, that brings us really nicely and neatly along to our first topic, because I think that Echo is a perfect example of this. And you can see my very neutral little label that I've given it in the
Hmm.
video there. So did you see any of Echo?
I watched the entire show. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
me too.
it was a slog to get through.
Yeah, I would describe it as an ASMR masterpiece. Like that thing just completely puts you to sleep. It is, it is, of all the Marvel shows I've seen, all right, it's not many, but of all the Marvel stuff I've seen, that's probably the most boring. I mean, I don't, is it the worst? It's hard to know if it's the worst, but it's certainly the most boring. Like that show will put anyone to sleep. It's just an absolute snooze fest. Did you find that, or do you think there's other Marvel content that is even less watchable?
Well, here's the thing. I have not watched a Marvel Disney Plus show in its entirety since Moon Knight in 2022. And that's probably the only Marvel Disney Plus show that I actually kind of like. I
Yeah,
only saw one episode of Miss Marvel after that, and it was very dry to the point where I decided, no, this is not really for me. And then, of course, She-Hulk came out with all the controversy and toxic feminism that show entailed, and I saw parts of it but never the whole thing. So this was the first show that I'd watched since then. And yeah, you're right. It was really, really, really dull. And looking at it now, I can see why they dropped the entire show immediately. They pulled the Netflix model and decided to just release it all at once so they could just get it over with, because I don't think anybody wanted this show to see the light of day. And looking at
yeah.
it now, it really does make sense why the main actress, nothing against her, it's just
Hmm.
she's not charismatic enough to lead a show like this. She's not not really likable at all. Um, and her entire shtick for the first 2 to 3 episodes is, "I have the biggest chip on my shoulder, and I want power," even though that was never really her MO in the Hawkeye show at all. She wanted revenge, and there were several lines in the first couple episodes that really just made me pull at my hair, and they were, what was it? Kingpin had his time or something like that.
Oh,
It's time for a queen. I threw up my
yeah.
hands at that point and I said, "Oh my word, that this is the it's not like they've ever been subtle about showcasing this sort of feminist power agenda, but this is the first time they've stated it so blatantly."
Yeah.
And it's like, why are you so proud of this? Why? Why is it?
I
I
thought
don't
I
know.
loved that line because it was like affirmative action for gang leaders. Because we
Mhm.
have affirmative action for everything else, right? I mean, Thomas Sowell is a great American writer, and
Yes, yes.
when he was once asked, don't you think it's time that America had a black president? And bear in mind, Thomas Sowell's a black man. He responded with
Mhm.
affirmative action for president. That was his response. And what Disney Plus have done, what Disney have done now, they've given us affirmative action for gangster thugs. So
Pretty much.
if you're getting murdered in the street, your main concern should be, what is the race and gender of the person who is currently beating me over the head with a baseball bat? Who sent you here? Was it a white man or was it a strong, powerful Native American female? I've written down, because you're right when you talk about her dull stoic personality. I've written down a list of character traits that I was able to identify in Echo, because I don't think that Echo is a character, not from what I saw on the show, but
Mhm.
she does have some traits. And I'm not, I was really trying as best as I could to write down everything about her character. Like a really well written character, like let's say Hannibal Lecter, would have um, probably over 100 character traits that you could jot down. For example, if you're talking about, say, Hannibal Lecter, it would be observant, intimidating, fiendish, intelligent, charming, observant, things like that. But it would go on and on and on when you have a character that complex.
Mhm.
And so I wrote down everything I could for Echo. And here's my list. And I want you to think about it and tell me if there's anything you would add to my list of Echo traits. Okay,
Sounds
so
great.
here
Let's
we
hear it.
go.
Yeah.
All right. So bloodthirsty, vengeful, angry, violent, sociopathic, bored, indifferent, cold, sexless. And that's honestly all I could think of. I couldn't think of anything else to add to the list.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I'd add narcissistic to that list if I could, um, just because she brings so little to the table and yet demands so much, especially on that
Yeah,
water tower scene at the first
yeah, I suppose
episode.
that's true. I mean, that's the other thing when she said it's time for a queen. The guy could have turned around to her and said, okay, that's not an argument. If you want to be the leader of the gang, you're going to need to do better than I'm a woman, make me the head of the gang. It's like, well, what do you offer? Are you offering, I don't know, a new connect to a Colombian drug gang that can provide us with a huge amount of cocaine and enrich us? Or
Mhm,
do you have political and police connections that can give us immunity from prosecution? Are you friends with the local DA and you can guarantee that we're not going to be prosecuted in court because she's corrupt? Something like apart from
mhm.
make me boss because I'm a woman.
Yeah,
It,
or
it's
do you have an army at your do you have an army at your back or some sort of following that you can draw upon to get in and get out and do what you need to do? But the fact that she has none of those things and is just a female indigenous Spanish, if I'm correct, disabled in 2 places, mind you, person, we're checking all the diversity boxes here. So because of all that, give me everything I want, everything that I want, and serve me is the essence
essentially,
of all this. Hmm.
yeah, and that's not just her. That's obviously, I mean, this is a great example of what diversity hiring has done to the quality of writing in
Hmm.
Hollywood. This isn't just a bad show on its own. Like, this is the result of a bunch of policies that Disney has pursued. The people writing this stuff shouldn't be writing anything. Like, they're clearly not experienced or qualified. And So for example, first of all, like there's no characterization for Echo. Echo doesn't have a character.
Mhm.
There's no arc. This is what I find when I was watching this. I thought, okay, so uh she's clearly a villain at the start, right? Because you see
Yep.
her with Kingpin murdering people. And I
Mhm.
thought, all right, so she's a villain, but is there going to be some sort of redemption and then she's going to become a good guy? And I'm aware that a lot of modern female characters are villains that are presented as heroes, right? So I'm aware that that's what I'm looking at on screen, but I'm thinking she is so obviously a villain. Like this isn't a case of, say, like Captain Marvel, who's a villain, but her crimes are to some extent inadvertent and they're part of a greater war. And you could understand why the writers might think she's a hero, even though she's really a villain. But in the case of Echo, it's very, very obvious that she's a villain. She's literally murdering people at the behest of a gangster. Like the gang lord Kingpin is right behind her, telling her to kill people. So we
Mhm.
see her as a murderer, and there's no sort of her redemption arc apparently is that she realized that Kingpin killed her father and then she killed Kingpin. But that's not a redemption arc. You've still murdered all those people. You
Mhm.
haven't made up for anything that you've done. You're clearly not sorry about it. And then later on, she goes basically on a killing spree, and she blows up a warehouse full of people who might have been guilty. They might have been innocent. Who knows? And I'm looking at this show thinking this woman, Echo or Maya, is a horrible villain. She's essentially a mass murderer, and it was so weird because the writers and the showrunners are presenting her to me as if she's a hero. She's got these Native American ancestors that are giving her powers, and
Don't even get me
the
started on that. Oh my word.
the music that plays, and when they show up, it's all very heroic. And at some point I was looking at it thinking, oh my god, this isn't a villain story. I thought maybe they were going for a dark villain story, like the protagonist as the lead character. But no, in the minds of the writers, she is a hero. She is a heroic character because of her various diversity checkboxes, because of the various disabilities and her perceived victimhood status. In the minds of the writers, that makes her a hero. She's already redeemed. It's absurd. It's absolutely absurd. Like she's a horrible, horrible villain, but in the show, she's presented as a hero just because disabled, deaf, etc.
No, I fully agree, and one of the things I think that could have made this show a little bit more nuanced and given some depth is that in the past, Marvel's kind of, like, perfected the art of the flashback. And they even did that with, say, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier when Bucky's dealing with his post-traumatic stress and he's having dreams and he can't really rest all that well. So you'd think that they robbed us of that sort of psychological element with a show like this because no matter who you are, if you kill a lot of people, even one person, it's gonna weigh on you regardless of who you are. So whether it's adrenaline that drives you, whether it's rage, whether it's any type of person behind you calling the shots, it's going to weigh on you who you kill and what they look like and who they were and their age and their gender, and you're going to remember those things. It's going to weigh on your soul. The weight of depravity will weigh on you. So the fact that they decided that they were going to create a character who doesn't seem to feel those things at all kind of just blows my mind because that's not human. Anyway,
Yeah,
if you take a life, you're going to feel that regardless.
yeah. The character comes off as very inhuman. Like when I was reading that little list of her
Mhm.
traits, that's a very tiny list of character traits for any human. It's she comes off as more like you said earlier. I think you said she felt robotic. She does feel a bit. She's like a murder bot or something. And yeah, you would imagine that having killed all those people, she'd feel something, or there'd be some sort of moral dilemma. Or, for example, at the end of Captain America: Winter Soldier, Iron
Fantastic
Man
movie.
is yeah, it's a quality movie. He's trying to
Mhm.
kill the Winter Soldier because the Winter Soldier assassinated his parents.
Mhm.
But obviously, during this time, he was brainwashed by the Soviets. But at the same time, the movie is still presenting you with this moral dilemma. Um, is is Iron Man really in the wrong at trying to avenge his parents? I mean, you can't seriously suggest that he is. If someone killed your parents in that way, you'd certainly want revenge. And Captain America obviously takes the position that he was brainwashed, he didn't know what he was doing, and he's trying to defend him. And it's a very interesting fight when Iron Man and Captain America are fighting. It's really psychologically interesting because you're not sure who to root for. But in the case of so Bucky's kind of this, he's a strange kind of villain, but at the same time with Echo, there's absolutely none of that. There's no nuance. There's no exploration of the psychological difficulty of being an assassin or anything. It's just, no, she's good, and you should like her because she's a woman.
Because we say so. Because we say so.
Yeah.
Because she's a woman. Because she's indigenous. Oh, mixed, some sort of mixed ethnicity, Spanish and indigenous. Because we're going straight for the diversity lottery here. Oh, and she's deaf and disabled.
And but the interesting thing is, it never occurred to the writers that people might not like the character. They just assumed that because in their worldview, she's basically a deity, right? They perceive the world through a kind of caste system with, straight white Christian men at the bottom and, indigenous, deaf, disabled, half Spanish, Native Americans at the top, right? To her, like to them, she's a kind of Brahmin deity. So it doesn't occur to them that people wouldn't like her. That's just naturally how they view the world. It's not even a choice that they make. I honestly don't think it occurred to them that people wouldn't like the character.
Yeah, we're dealing in the currency in modern entertainment is pigmentation and or melanin, and the more you have of it, the better you are. The less you do, well, your story's not really worth telling. And the fact that Maya's half Hispanic, half indigenous of some kind, and plus she has part of a leg missing and she's deaf. Well, we've hit the diversity lottery. Like I said, who wouldn't love this show, quote unquote?
Yeah.
And this is really the minds of the writers completely.
There's one aspect of the show I want to talk about in particular, and that is sexlessness, because this has become a big problem in a lot of Disney content in particular. You see it particularly in Star Wars, and more recently in Marvel. Over the past few years, it's becoming more and more obvious in Marvel that they're emasculating their male characters and they're desexualizing their female characters. So the females basically don't have any, that they are sexless. The Marvels was like that. I remember I was talking about the Marvels on stream, and I mentioned that it's just really weird. It's so strange. It's this kind of emotional uncanny valley, watching three women together, and there's never a sideways glance from a man. There's never a mention of a romantic interest. There's never any indication that any of these women, and there's the villain as well, she's a woman. There's no indication at all throughout any of this that any of these women have sexuality, that they find men or women attractive in any way. It just doesn't come up ever, and it's so weird. And it's not like this is an adult thing. You would get this in Disney cartoons for children back in the day. You would get it with Belle and Beauty and the Beast. She's a character who is sought after by a man. But no, throughout the entirety of the Marvels, there's not a sideways glance. And then with Echo, same thing. The male characters are largely emasculated, and Echo herself is completely sexless. She is never there's one instance where she is felt up by a guy, but that's not so much there to indicate that she is a sexual being. That's really just there so that she can, because he's an evil white man and she can kick his ass a little. And that's basically all that is. But that is the only instance in the show that has textual or subtextual that communicates that she is in any way a sexual being. Do you find that weird? Or do you think that I'm just,
it's beyond bizarre.
That I'm looking.
It's beyond.
Yeah. What do you think?
It's beyond bizarre. It's so completely strange, and call me old-fashioned, but I do like when my female characters have a bit of femininity. I mentioned it in a video, I think a couple of months ago, that we've kind of lost sight of what makes women women. There's nothing wrong with being a caregiver. There's nothing wrong with wanting to be a wife and a mother and a loving partner. Those things have existed for thousands upon thousands of years, and they're what drives society in a way. So the fact that they're trying to take away certain aspects of all the aspects of what make women attractive to the opposite sex it's very dehumanizing, and it's kind of robbing the regular average girl, I guess, of her ability to be beautiful and noticeable. Because the only thing these women are noticeable for is their narcissistic attitude and their complete sense of entitlement to everything in their vicinity. And it paints the rest of us who are, normal. It puts us in a bad light. It really does.
Yeah. So moving on, there's a few aspects of Echo I want to get to. Another one is that there's a thread of a plot. The plot is basically that Maya, oh Christ, it's so forgettable that I'm struggling to remember I'm trying to elevator pitch the plot. So if I were to throw out the plot as briefly as I could, it would be Maya is a former assassin who worked for Kingpin, and then she killed Kingpin, and now she's returning to her hometown, but she's also trying to take down Kingpin's organization so that she can either take it over. I'm not sure because in episode 2 or something, she says she wants to be queen, and then later it seems like she doesn't really care. She just wants to be out. It's contradictory, actually. And there's some side characters. I can't really describe it beyond that. But what did you see much plot in this?
No, there was
Kingpin's
nothing.
there, and he's trying to get Maya back for some reason, but I don't know why, because he has no motivation.
Yeah, poor Vincent D'Onofrio. I mean, I have not seen the Marvel Daredevil show in its entirety, because when it first came out, I wasn't really a fan of superheroes, so I didn't watch it. But of course, I think everyone and their dog has seen that infamous hallway fight scene where they just
it's great.
Go over the top of the hallway and then show how it's absolutely brutal. I've watched it a couple of times and I'm exhausted by the end of it. And I really do feel like somebody needs to apologize to the poor man, or get him a Netflix season 4 or another season of Daredevil, because he really needs a chance to redeem himself as a character. Because good God, that was awful. That was so completely
it's
awful.
Hard to watch.
Especially the last
Vincent
episode
D'Onofrio.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well,
no, I want to hear this. The last episode where.
Oh, good God. Okay, well, that ties more into the ridiculous power dynamic that Maya is somehow given in the show and suddenly knows how to use for some ridiculous reason. She has the ability apparently to heal people, from what I understand. That's what it looks like. So she goes into his mind and heals him mentally, so he decides he wants to be a good person afterwards, which is why he's contemplating, I'm assuming, running for mayor of New York. I just, my mind was blown, I think, for the last 20 or so minutes of the show, because I thought to myself, geez, if you were on LSD, this would probably be a trip. But as a sane average person, this makes absolutely no sense. You've completely gutted a character that either had no problems or was just fantastic all around, all for the sake of what? What did you do with this show? What is the point of this freaking show, other than to just get it out there? Because I don't know.
You're right about the last episode, though. The last episode of Echo is among it. Is it the worst thing Marvel have ever done? Is it? Because the last episode in particular is just god awful. Nothing happens for about, 20, 25 minutes. It's all really boring build up. Maya goes to this wee festival and she does a dance. And her friend is working the car park. I can't really remember anything else. And then Vincent D'Onofrio shows up with his goons. The Kingpin shows up with his goons. And then there's the worst fight in Marvel history, where Maya's ancestors take possession of the bodies of her relatives, and then her relatives beat up all the bad guys, and that's it. That's the fight. And by far, like, the worst part of the show, and this was actually really funny, it was when one of the Native American ancestors takes possession of the body of like a 72-year-old woman, and she beats up the guy. He's like 6'3", and he's holding her at gunpoint, and she just turns around and knocks his ass out. That was really funny. But that last episode might be the worst thing Marvel's ever done. What do you think? Have you seen anything worse than that?
I don't want to I don't want to discount She-Hulk because I've heard some very odd things about the season finale of that show.
Yeah, I haven't seen all
But,
of She-Hulk. I haven't seen it all. I've
mhm.
seen the first
But at this,
few episodes.
mhm. Yeah, I saw the twerking scene, and at that point, I was like, okay, they've just completely gone off the rails. Marvel has become TikTok these days.
Yeah.
There's no substance. It's all flash and all ridiculous gimmicks and things like that. So I can't honestly say if it's been the worst episode, but it's definitely up there. Of everything I've seen, it's definitely up there. The one redeeming thing about the show is that Daredevil is only in a 30-second scene at the very beginning, so they didn't have the opportunity to ruin him. I think they've already
Yeah.
done that with She-Hulk. From what I understand, he was in She-Hulk and it was not good at all. Um, oh gosh, but it was just a masterclass of everything not to do when you're writing. When you're writing fight scenes, when you're writing choreo, when you're writing character development and plot and believability. It was a masterclass in how not or how not to do those things, how to completely destroy a character. That was the masterclass of what this episode was.
Yeah, there was all. I mean, talking about the fight before we get to the before we get to the fight choreography, I wanted to talk a little bit about the superpowers because you said that there's no believability. There's no reason
Mhm.
for suspension of disbelief. So, for example, if you look at Black Widow, right? Why am I
Yes.
watching a 5'5" woman beating up, 6'5" big stuntman? How am
Mhm.
I able to disengage the critical thinking part of my brain and accept this is real? It's called verisimilitude in
Mhm.
dramatic terminology. How is this believable? And in the case of Black Widow, it's because she is a highly trained, basically like super trained to the point of brainwashed former assassin.
Mhm.
And so she's been doing this her whole life and she's very good at all of this martial arts stuff. And it's still pushing it. Even then, it's still just about believable, but you can get it with someone like Black Widow or with Hawkeye. How is he able to make a shot every time? Hawkeye is basically a superhero. He's got this. It's not just that he's a great archer; it's basically a superpower that he has this super accuracy. He's
Mhm.
kind of a super soldier, so you can go with that. And or if you see Steve Rogers, Captain America, why is he able to do all these amazing things? It's because he is the product of a science experiment to build super soldiers, things like that. But I'm watching
Mhm.
Maya and she's throwing men through walls. She's beating up rooms full of stuntmen. She is taking on Daredevil and standing her own ground against Daredevil. And there's no reason to believe any of this. All of this happens before her superpowers really come in, before she's able to really control them. So
Mhm.
basically what the show is telling me is she's just able to do this because she's just that much of a badass. It has nothing to do with the superpowers. She's just such a badass that she can do all of this stuff. And there's zero believability there. And that's without even pointing out that she only has one leg. She's got an artificial leg. That's
Yeah.
just completely shatters immersion and exposes the show as just pure girl boss trash.
Mhm. No, no, I agree, and it's in fights like these, they've removed a sort of they've removed the brutality from them a little bit. Like I said in the Daredevil Netflix show, those fights were brutal. You're gonna be exhausted and tired, and you'll be giving it your all because you don't want to be the be the last person standing, essentially. Um,
Hmm.
this fight scene was so quick at the very beginning, and she go when she. I think the most unbelievable part for me was when she dashed back into the room and then kicked that chair at the security guard. It was a metal chair. It was a metal chair, and yet she kind of flung it across the room like it was a wooden toothpick. Unless you're
Yeah,
Captain America,
the
what are you
physics
doing?
didn't make any sense. You would need to hit it with the force of a industrial machine to get it to do that.
Pretty much. Yeah, you'd have to be using a forklift to get it to hit someone with enough force to knock them out like the way she kicked it. So as soon as I saw that, I'm like, I'm not going to take anything in this fight at all seriously because they've removed any essence of logic or believability from it completely. So why should
Yeah.
I be expected to give a, you know?
Yeah, and it's had all the worst traits of bad fight choreography. So, for example, a big criticism of, say, Hong Kong fight choreography from all the Hong Kong movies, especially back in the day. It's not more of a,
Mhm.
it's not an issue recently, but back when the Bruce Lee movies and the Jackie Chan movies were coming out, a common criticism of them back then
Mhm.
was that the Hong Kong fight choreography style, guys would stand around in a big circle and attack the good guy one by one. And then one guy'd get his ass kicked, and then another guy, and they would just, rather than just all attack at the same time. And that's exactly what is happened in Echo. Guys just stand around and wait their turn to get their ass kicked. So she'll fight one guy, and then there's another guy in the hall, like, he's in the hallway. If you look in the background, he's kind of doing this. And
Mhm.
then when it's his turn, he rushes forward to get his ass kicked, and then there's another guy behind him. It looks bloody awful. So it has that. The stuntmen have clearly had to slow down to accommodate the actress. And like you said, there's parts of the fights that are really short. And I think that's because probably for cardio, she doesn't have the stamina to to do choreographed fight sequences for very long before she's just too exhausted to continue. So I think they had to shoot it using a lot of doubles, and for the scenes where you can see her face, they had to make them very short for that reason, because she would just be visibly exhausted very quickly, and you can even see it in some of the
Mhm.
scenes. For example, if you look at the thumbnail for this video, her face in that scene when she's grappling a guy, I think she's trying
Yeah.
to get some sort of guillotine. Like, the actress is exhausted. You can see it in her face. Like, she's just
Mhm.
gassed from the actual shoot. So the fight choreography is, I would say, the worst I've seen. Certainly the worst I saw last year. It's maybe the worst Marvel. It is. It's the worst Marvel have ever done. That fight choreography.
No, I
Um,
agree, and I heard a rumor somewhere that the actress was just extremely out of shape,
yeah,
from God knows what, so they had to accommodate for her in a manner that would just play to her strengths if she had any when it comes to fight choreo. Um, so and this was the result of it, which is a very poor fight sequence that was very blurry, very shaky, and utilized way too many stuntmen. And you can clearly see that I don't know, they were using a stuntman obviously for Daredevil, but the stuntman who was playing him was just miles upon miles ahead of her, and it showed that he had to slow down so she could keep up with him, and that's why the fight between them was so short. And then, of
yeah,
course, in the very next scene, when she's speaking to Kingpin, he says, none of my men have held their own against him, I guess, like you," and I'm or like that, and I'm like, "Oh
and bear in
gosh."
mind, this is without superpowers.
Yes, yes, this is without superpowers when he has his own, but we're starting equal with everybody else without superpowers, and then we're just elevating it when we do have them. And we're so good that we can manifest those powers in other people and pull a Children of the Corn and kick everybody. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Now on to my favorite part of Echo, which is, and I'll phrase this as a question. Echo's superpowers, are they just great, or are they the greatest Marvel superpowers?
Great in terms of awful, or just you're I know you're being
Just like
sarcastic,
the
but
best?
like
Like, is it does do you think that Echo has the best superpowers out of all the Marvel heroes, comic and
no,
movies?
not at all. Not at all. Because I think in the comics, wasn't she supposed to have one of her abilities supposed to be some sort of replication power?
I
Or
actually
so
was meant
she
to
was
look it
similar in
up.
Taskmaster.
No, I
Yeah, she
just,
was
I mean, I'm just saying, like, is it the worst? Like, have you seen worse superpowers? Bearing in mind,
have I seen worse?
they don't really manifest until the last 10. Like, this thing is 5 episodes long. Its total runtime is probably close to 4 hours, and her superpowers don't really show up until the last 15 minutes, like 10, 15 minutes, and that's the only time they really kick in. And other
Mhm.
than that, they only come in flashes, and she's not even able to control them. And they suck. They're not even really superpowers. One of them is so she has the powers of her ancestors. One of them
Mhm.
is one of her ancestors was a really good shot, and she was able to shoot evil white cowboys really well. And
Yeah.
so then now Echo is a really good shot briefly. And another one is she's able to push very well, because she had a female ancestor who was a really good lacrosse player, and this female
Yeah.
ancestor was able to push guys on a lacrosse field really well. It's not actually lacrosse; it's some Native American equivalent. but
It was
something.
lacrosse. Let's be honest, it was lacrosse.
Yeah, I mean, it was lacrosse. So that's it. That's what did you think of those superpowers?
There's no defining them, to be honest with you. When you can't define something that a character can do, well, how are you even the hero that you're supposed to embody? I thought I saw what the scene where she's pushing the train off of her mechanical leg. I'm like, well, okay, is it super strength power? Which is of course very generic, but if you do it right, well then fine. Um, but that scene didn't really make all that much sense to me, to be perfect, to tell you the truth. Um, and then there's the powers her mother has, which are essentially healing, and then another ancestor has uh, oh gosh, has the ability to shoot really well, which was very very dumb. That whole scene with Tucklow or whatever, the whole black and white scene in episode 3, that was awful. I need to
That was
slap whoever came up with
horrendous.
that.
Oh, that was just awful to watch. It was so boring as well. I mean, I get what they were trying to do. They were maybe trying to do things a little bit different with the description cards, like early 20th century cinema. But
Mhm.
man, that got really boring really fast. Like, there's a reason they stopped doing that, because it's just not pleasant to look at. It's really it's disengaging and dull, and it went on and on and on and on and on, and my god, it was bloody awful.
No, I think she definitely has the worst because they're the most undefinable. Here's the thing: if they decided to go with a healing element to power, I actually think that could have been kind of neat because you don't really see powers like that. Um, and it would maybe it would soften her character a little bit if she was kind of forced to become a healer in that instance.
Mhm.
Um, again, it might not have been a bad idea, but they decided to just give her the entire rainbow of abilities because all she's doing is really channeling her ancestors.
Mhm.
So it kind of ended up being completely unpoignant and unmeaningful.
I mean, yeah, we could go on talking about the problem with the superhero powers, but would end up talking about Echo forever. But yeah, there's
Mhm.
like you say, if you can't define a power, really, it sucks. Like, that should be a very general writing rule. Like, here's a writing rule for a if you can't do an elevator pitch, it's not a good screen.
No, I agree. I fully agree. Everyone's powers up until this point
Can you
have
hear me?
been
Okay.
well defined. Yeah, I get you cut off there for a second, but I think you're okay now. Um, everyone's powers up until this point from the
Yeah.
beginning of the MCU, whether they have them or not, have been very well defined. And if they don't have a power, they have a specific ability that makes them able to hold their own with a hero. For example, Tony Stark has his suit, Hawkeye
But I
had
mean,
his
even
weapons, his
Tony
bows and
Stark
arrows
has
and
a
whatnot.
superpower. Like, yeah, I mean, even Tony Stark, like, he doesn't have a superpower, but in a sense, he does, because his superpower is essentially his engineering genius.
He's a
So
brain.
that's
It's his
treated
brain. He's
as
a
a kind
genius.
of
Yeah.
superpower.
Hmm. But
And that is it's a super, and also his money. He's able to
yeah,
fund
that
the
too.
Avengers.
Hmm.
So there's those two things. That's what he brings to the table. And then he has his Iron Man suit, and the Iron Man suit is a kind of physical manifestation of his genius. It's one of the reasons it works so well.
Hmm.
Whereas, so he's a really well-rounded character. There's a lot going on there in terms of powers and abilities. Or,
Hmm.
Steve Rogers. It's very simple. What are Steve Rogers' powers? Super strength, super stamina, super recovery, super speed. Basically, he's
That too.
he's a
Basically,
super soldier.
yep.
But if you were to ask what are Maya's superpowers, you'd just be talking for the next 3 minutes about her ancestors. It's boring, it's dull, it's convoluted, it's a complete mess.
No, yeah, I and the fact that she seems to know how to use them after she hallucinates her mom, uh,
Yeah.
right before, kind of just blows my mind to smithereens. Um, how do you okay? If your powers seem to be kind of mental, if you're reaching back to all your ancestors, how specifically are you manifesting them and calling them forward? There's got to be at least a vague process for how to do that. But the fact that she kind of just waves her hands, abracadabra, and suddenly they're there. All of the women are behind her, and then seems to know how to just channel it into other people. It might be a bit more believable if she was the one who was manifesting the abilities of her ancestors within herself. But the fact that she's able to transfer those powers to other people really just doesn't make all that much sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's everything wrong with the show. if you were to look at the script for that, I mean, and you know this, you're in publishing, you read a lot of stuff for a living. If you
Mhm.
were presented with the script for that, let's say you were a script supervisor, not a script supervisor, if you were like a script doctor,
Yeah.
and someone passed you the script for Echo and said, "What do you think of this? Is there anything here?" How would you respond to that?
Burn it with fire immediately. No, okay, not not quite like that. I do have to maintain an air of professionalism, but I would say this needs a lot of work, and then I'd probably go through it with a fine tooth comb prior to talking to them because you got to be kind of sensitive to authors. Everyone's very sensitive in that industry, so you have to temper and
Yeah,
measure your responses. But at the same
mhm,
time, I'm kind of a blunt person, so it'd be very very hard for me to hold back if I was presented with a script like this because everything about it is wrong. Everything about it is wrong. The only thing I could say that I kind of liked, I mean, I liked the usage of sign language. I just like how it looks, but that's not something you would include. No, you could. I guess you could include it in a Marvel show if you had an actress who was charming and likable and somebody who could pull off facial expressions really, really well. This
mhm.
this actress, she can't. Her expressions are half-lidded eyes and a lowered mouth and a completely unfurrowed eyebrow half the time. So if you can't pull off facial expressions, if you can't pull off any sort of emotional manifestation, well then there's no point in having a character like this. I would have to have tell the person who handed the script to me, go back and redo this entire thing and then come back to me when you have something marketable because as it stands, this is going nowhere but the trash.
Yeah, and you're right about her acting. Like she has a lot of the time, casting directors or directors will say something like, "I can't use her; she has no range." For
Mhm.
example, I mean Stanley Kubrick in one of which movie was it? There's a very famous role. It was Spartacus, I believe. He was working with Kirk Douglas, I think is Michael
Okay.
Douglas's father. And
Yeah.
now this was the only movie, the only big movie that Kubrick worked on where he wasn't actually in control. Kirk Douglas was in
Mhm.
control. He was the producer, and he
Yeah.
hired Stanley Kubrick after the first director wasn't working out. And Kubrick was so annoyed at the leading woman in the movie that he went to Douglas's house and said, "I want rid of her. She has no range. She can't she can't emote the way I need her to emote." And then he actually
Mhm.
brought the actress in and had her perform a scene in front of Kirk Douglas to demonstrate this. And afterward, Kirk Douglas had to admit that Kubrick was right and they had to recast the role. And the specific reason Kubrick identified was because she didn't have range. And yeah, when I look at someone like this Echo actress, and look, it's not her fault. She's not an actress. She was an Amazon warehouse worker
Really?
when, yeah, she was an Amazon warehouse worker when she got the
No.
gig.
Oh
Yeah,
my
well, it's
god.
because Disney put out a casting call. They wanted a a female Native American deaf person who was also an amputee, and this Echo actress, Valakwa Cox or something you call her.
Mhm.
She was literally the only person who responded to the casting call because I think she's probably the only person in the country that ticks those boxes. And that's why she got the job because she was the only person responded. And I think that's the one positive of it. I'm glad that this woman who was, let's face it, not dealt a stellar hand in
Mhm.
life was able to get out of a stinking Amazon warehouse and maybe hopefully make quite a bit of money doing this Echo show. I hope she made a lot of money
Mhm.
out of it. So that's the only positive. But so I'm glad for her
Yeah.
that she got a bit of money, but she's not an actress. She can't act at all. She's terrible.
No, no, and but you would think that if somebody is offered the once in a lifetime opportunity of being in a Marvel Disney Plus show and given the role of a superhero, you would put absolutely everything you had into this role, whether it's acting lessons, whether it's stunt work and choreo. I would be working my tail off 24/7 if I was offered an opportunity like this. So
Yeah,
why wasn't she?
yeah, that's
Why?
true.
Why did
And apparently she was putting on weight as well. Like when they started shooting, she was at the correct size that they wanted her at, you know,
Mhm,
reasonably healthy. And then apparently they stopped shooting and she went off and she gained 20 pounds. And when she came back, her none of her suits fit, like her costume stuff didn't fit anymore. Apparently
mhm.
she was really conscious of it. And nobody
So
it
lose
was
the weight.
apparently it was a yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know what happened, but that's I heard that on one of Critical Drinker streams. He was saying that he had heard from someone who was on the set that it was a really unpleasant shoot because it was so awkward that this girl had gained the weight and no one wanted to tell her, and she was very self-conscious, and everyone knew that her acting was fucking awful, but it was sort of something that you couldn't really say. I suspect as well, no one wanted to be accused of being an istophobe, so they didn't really speak out against it.
Good Lord.
You know what I mean?
No, I do. And I think to myself, if this show is going to be seen by, I don't know how many people, it would have been seen by a lot, not nearly as much as if it was a good show, but it would still going to be seen by a lot of people. So if you want to get more acting jobs in the future, are you not going to put your best foot forward physically, mentally, and give the performance of your entire life? There's acting lessons you can take. There's physical work you can do in order to get ready for a role like this, because they've decided Echo is going to be an extremely physical character, because to make up for the lack of the fact that she can't speak or she can't hear. So why not do that? Why not give it your all? Why not put everything you have into a role like this to increase your staying power in Hollywood and to give just a good performance that people are going to enjoy? I don't think the actress was going to want to be remembered for the fact that she is not great at what she does and couldn't keep up physically with a lot of the stuntmen, because that's what she's going to be remembered for now. So if people are going to remember a performance like this, why would you not put in the work to ensure that they remember you for the best things that you gave to the role?
Yeah, and there are there are examples of that. I mean, a very famous example is Sylvester Stallone for Rocky. This like the shit that he put himself through when he was training for that role. And for example, there's a famous scene in the first Rocky movie where he's running, and then he's running past a boat, right? And the director who was tracking the shot, he realized that Rocky in front of the boat, the silhouette looked great. So he signaled to Sylvester Stallone, like, fucking speed up, speed up. And Stallone, like, he sped up, but it took every ounce of everything he had because he'd already been running for a while at that stage. But he did it anyway, and absolutely killed himself to get this shot, this run shot silhouetted against the boat, and it was perfect. It worked, but you can really tell watching that movie that the guy was in pain during that. And his running was amazing. Like, he was a great runner. And it looked amazing, but yeah, I don't think that same level of dedication shows. She just didn't have it, you know.
No, I do. And that's kind of the problem with Hollywood and all its subsidiaries these days. People are afraid to push the actors too hard, because they have a lot more power than they should, in my personal opinion. They're afraid to tell someone that they're wrong, or tell someone they need to be better, or to wise up, or to anything with regards to this. And people have kind of gotten to the point where a Hollywood movie does not carry the same mystique or awe or just excitement that it used to. So the fact that people just don't care anymore, and it really is kind of sad. And if they don't care, they're not going to put the best product forth that they can. And if that's the case, well, then what's the point in even watching?
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to move on to the Marvels examining the disaster.
Oh, good Lord.
So, yeah,
Where should we start with this?
I mean, that's the thing. I did an hour and how long was it? Like an hour and 25-minute long Marvel video, and
Oh my gosh.
I could have gone on. I could have gone on and on and on. Little Platoon did a 5.5-hour video on it, and I really could have
God
gone
bless
on
him.
with it. But I actually had to limit my criticism to like key areas. There was stuff that I just, because I just didn't want to bore myself to death with this movie, and I wanted to keep it reasonably concise. But that's a long video, and it's very concise. I'm trying my best not to go overboard and examine too much of it. But my God, everything was wrong with this movie.
Well, honestly, I'm trying to figure out which elements. It's more a point of what is the lesser evil of this movie? Was it?
That's good. That's a good place to start. I mean, were there any positives here? In all seriousness.
In all seriousness, okay. I don't know if I'd call this a positive, but I found Iman Vellani's character in the Marvels refreshing. She was all right.
Yeah,
I didn't mind her.
She was good. Yeah, I quite liked her. I thought she gave a good performance.
And I think the actress was just kind of happy to be there. She's one of those people I can't actresses that I can't really find fault with. She's just happy to be on screen and happy to play a character that's this quality. She's happy to be a superhero, and that's really all it is. She's happy and she's fun and she's cotton candy, and I have no problems with that. By all means, she should do her thing. But in terms of anything else, I honestly think that was it. I can't think of any other
Yeah,
aspect of the movie that was likable or fun,
yeah. I
in
mean, you
my
look at
opinion.
like Brie Larson's performance was the complete polar opposite of Iman Vellani. She just did not want to be there. She was checked out of the role. She looked bored to death.
Hmm.
A lot of the time, you can see her standing around while the other actors are talking, and she's just waiting to get off the set.
Hmm.
She was
Hmm.
checked out of that role, and then the woman who played Darben was bloody awful.
Oh
But
gosh.
I mean, she's the Loki actor, Tom Hiddleston's wife, and I would guess that Tom Hiddleston got her in there to just try to get some treasure off the sinking ship before it goes under.
Hmm.
My God, but yeah, I mean, you did a review on this, and I think you said something like, "What did I just watch?" Were you that?
Yeah.
Were you shocked that it was as bad as it was? Were you expecting better?
No, no, I wasn't. I was. It was just a matter of what sort of disaster this is going to be. Is it an avalanche? Is it going to be an avalanche off a cliff? Is it going to be an 18-car pileup? Is it going to be a mudslide? I wasn't sure which sort of disaster I would be watching, but I knew without a doubt it was going to be one. Just from the trailers alone, the characterization of Nick Fury, who has completely and utterly disgraced himself as a character, um, to the cats, to the freaking cats. What, what, what? I think that was the part where I went to see the movie with a friend of mine back in November, and maybe it's either a testament to where I live or it's a testament to just how bad Marvel as a brand has become. Because it was like it was no, it wasn't opening night, but it was a week after, and no one was in the theater. I think it was
Yeah,
just us and maybe a few other people, and that was it. And that's a testament of either people not wanting to go to the movies anymore, or people have already heard how bad the film was and they just weren't interested. Everybody was as checked out as Brie Larson in my theater. And for the first 20 minutes, it seemed to follow a sort of consistent pattern. So I thought, okay, maybe I need to eat some humble pie on my channel later and say, okay, maybe this wasn't as bad. And then it kind of just fell off a cliff. And I'm not sure when it fell off a cliff. It could have been with the introduction of Darwin, or it could have been with they were on this alien planet with the Skrulls and they're sucking the air out of the planet through this portal to come back to what was the planet called? Hala. Uh,
yeah,
so they could renew the air there because apparently it was toxic. At that point, I kind of just looked at my friend and I said, "What are we watching?" We walked out of the theater in kind of complete silence, and she says to me, "Caitlin, um, this is going to be a doozy of a review." I said, "You're right. I don't know what I'm going to say, but it's going to be a good one."
yeah. That's the thing. You come out, you look at something like the Marvels, and you just sort of think, Jesus, where do you even start with this? There's just so much wrong with it. I mean, it's without doubt the worst. I mean, do you think it's the worst Marvel movie? I thought it was like the worst movie of the year, hands down.
Definitely the worst movie of the year. I mean, at that point, Ant-Man was pretty high up there on my list of awful movies. Ant-Man 3, but this is definitely the worst movie of the year. I wouldn't say it's the worst Marvel movie since Phase 4, but yet I still Thor: Love and Thunder is still on my hit list for just how awful of a film that was.
Yeah.
I can't stand Jane Foster. She's one of those characters I absolutely loathe from the bottom of my soul, and I
Why?
hate
Why?
bashing. Why?
Oh no, I want to hear some Jane Foster bashing.
Oh dear.
Go on.
Well, in this movie, she the hammer was made to protect Jane. Apparently, the
Yeah.
hammer is a sentient being. Apparently, um, that was made to protect Jane, and in the protecting of her, it takes away her cancer and makes her a female Thor. And what I hated about this is that it was one of the early iterations of this character is a role. It's not a character anymore. So the role is transferable. The role of Thor is transferable, apparently. The role of Loki is transferable. The role of Captain America is transferable. The role of Hawkeye is transferable. So is the role of of every other male character and in any other franchise that you could think of. And so I began to she was one of the first characters where it began to become real to me that, oh, they don't see these men as characters anymore. They're just roles to be given and exchanged. So any value that they have can be passed on to another character and they can instantly become irrelevant. And that is why I hated her so much in this film. That and the fact that she picks up the hammer, looks like an Asgardian goddess immediately, and apparently has the ability to fight like one. Thor, correct me if I'm wrong, but Thor is like 1,500 years old and has been
Yeah.
fighting enemies for centuries upon centuries upon centuries. He has the training, he has the political experience, even though Marvel didn't do jack with it when they had him. And he has all of these skills and abilities that are somehow transferable now by hammer. By
Apparently,
hammer?
yeah. And the suit, like the suit and everything is transferable by hammer.
Oh, don't get me started on her arms. The fact that they CGI'd her biceps will forever be disastrous to me. Who decided that that was a good idea? Get the actress to work out as hard as she can. I believe that way more than whatever CGI garbage you decide to throw on the screen and assault my eyes with. Ugh. Anyway, that was a rant I don't think I
Yeah.
needed to go on.
The fundamental premise of the movie didn't even make sense. Like the Mjolnir chooses the hammer chooses Natalie Portman because she's worthy, and apparently it wants to save her from her cancer. But then later we discover that the use of the hammer is draining her life energy.
Which
So in a
makes sense.
sense, yeah, because Mjolnir is supposed to be a sentient being. So in a sense, why would Mjolnir call Natalie Portman over to itself to take up the mantle of Thor if it's going to kill her? That would make Mjolnir a murderer.
Pretty much, yeah.
It makes no sense.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the only good thing about that movie was Christian Bale, but Christian Bale was so wasted, so wasted.
I thought Gore could have been the best villains. He had in my mind he had the potential to be the best villain yet, because he, with a name like Gore the God Butcher, you would expect that to be. And I haven't read any of the comics that feature him, but I've gone looking for certain scenes and come across panels where his character is essentially an extremely philosophical one, and there's a very interesting religious aspect to him as well, where he'll question the validity of the gods and what their nature is and what role they play in the universe. And I was stupid me was expecting there to be some level of that in this movie, because I love philosophical things, I love psychological things. So the fact that they had the opportunity to tap into that with a character like this, I was really psyched to see. They did nothing. They did
So
absolutely
wasted.
nothing. Absolutely nothing. And then they decided that instead of him being a completely evil character, they were going to spin it as the sword poisoning him in a way. So not only do they make him a hollowed out husk, they take away any accountability he had to the people that he killed by saying, oh, he wasn't in full control of his actions. It was the blade that was influencing a lot of what he was doing.
Yeah, and also his daughter died, so he was kind of a victim of circumstance, and it's not really his fault. It's this social justice notion that as long as you have a tragic enough past, then you're not really responsible for your crimes.
Exactly.
So you can have two people in front of a judge who have committed the exact same crime. Let's say they ran into the street and beat somebody over the head with a hammer. Now, one of the guys, nice family, nice background, middle class, he did it, but he doesn't have a tragic backstory, so he goes to jail. But the other guy, he's a minority, and he was raised in poverty, and his dog died recently, and his mom has cancer, and he's struggling financially. Like, who cares? It's the same crime. Apply the law. I cannot stand that social justice thinking that a tragic backstory or a tragic past excuses your crimes in the present and it somehow exempts you from prosecution. And this isn't just in movies. Like, this is butchered the Western, particularly in the United States. It's absolutely destroyed the justice system.
No, I agree. And the fact that it's sinking into movies now and saying if your life is bad enough, you will get off without any sort of, you will not have to be accountable for any of your actions. You won't have to be accountable to anybody for anything. And it's creating this generation of people who are just so entitled, utterly and completely entitled. And it's getting a little disturbing, to be honest with you, because the more this happens, we're going to be living in a generation with selfish people who don't know how to care for others, who don't understand what it means that when I say actions have consequences. it's a little frightening, I won't lie. And the fact that they're seeing this in movies constantly, and I think I made a video a while back on how villains have just aren't what they used to be. Every villain these days has a tragic backstory. Every villain has a sob story. No villain is just nuts for the sake of being nuts anymore. I need the Joker back, something fierce.
Yeah.
And they don't really have any other motivations beyond revenge. No character is evil simply for the sake of being evil anymore, or wants to see the world burn, like they say in The Dark Knight. Um, and I miss that. I really do. Because
Yeah.
what you're doing with that sort of mindset is you're redefining the lines between good and evil. And if you're redefining the lines between good and evil, so you can't really know what those things are anymore, you won't know what evil looks like, and you won't know what good looks like, and people will forget about things like morals, which is
Yeah.
very, very disturbing.
Yeah, they always do this in the Disney remakes now, like those absolute abominations, which are they've become the worst movie genre. It used to be torture porn, like that stupid movie with the clown
Hmm.
who dresses up in black and white. I can't remember what it was, but it's a disgusting movie. And like these really super deliberately gory, graphic horror movies used to be, in my opinion, the worst genre. It's essentially a form of pornography.
Hmm.
Disney live action remakes are worse. They are worse. Like I despise them with every fiber of my being. They're absolutely they're plagiarisms. Like they are,
Hmm.
apart from anything else, they are plagiarized works, right? And if you
Yeah.
were to present that, if a film school student were to present that as a final project, they'd be kicked out for plagiarism. And Disney are doing this shit on a massive scale. And Disney always do that with their characters. They always try to give their characters in the live action remake some sort of tragic backstory. So, for example, Hook in the Captain, that piece of garbage, Peter Pan and Wendy. Hook was
I
given
haven't
a
seen it.
tragic backstory. Thank Jesus, don't watch it. Like you couldn't watch it. Like even if you attempted to watch it, you'd be done in 20 minutes. They
Hmm.
gave Hook a tragic backstory and tried to make him a basically ambiguous villain, a morally ambiguous villain. And they've done it with a bunch of different ones. Did it with Jafar and Aladdin. It's just
Oh, oh,
And
God,
my
burn
god,
that
I
movie
tell
with
you what, the
fire.
worst butchering, like the worst adaptation out of all of those absolute abominations, I would say maybe the worst character transposition was Jafar. Jafar was great in the cartoon. He was cunning and evil and just a
Hmm.
great juicy villain. And they turned him into this absolutely pansy ass, basically retard. He was like a
Hmm.
retarded kind of man child in the
Hmm.
live action, and he was played by this garbage actor who was just absolutely terrible. What they did to Jafar was just unforgivable. I hate those live action remakes with a bloody
Hmm.
passion.
Well,
Um,
Jafar wasn't
yeah.
the only one.
Anyway,
I think.
back
I
to
think
sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Jasmine. Jasmine. They did her a disservice as well. At the time when I first saw the movie, the only thing I really liked about it was the song "Speechless." But looking back now, I think to myself, they made Jasmine into this politician who wants
Yeah.
to take the place of her father and be this magnanimous ruler when Jasmine was never that sort of person. She wanted to marry for love. That was her whole shtick. And again, I admired that about her. There was nothing wrong with that. Why did they change that? And they essentially removed a lot of the romance between her and Aladdin in order to give her more screen time to talk about her political affiliations and her political desires, which is exhausting to see because every female character and their dog is doing that these days.
Yeah. When I watched the show, and this was years ago when I watched that Aladdin remake. I went to see it in cinema because an ex girlfriend of mine made me take her, and I was watching it and I was thinking, why does Jasmine want to be the Sultan? It's never explained. There's never any sort of explanation offered as to why this woman believes that she should be Sultan. It's never, there's never, she doesn't have any sort of platform. She never says anything like, there are three specific things I want to do in the kingdom. So she never says, for
Mhm.
example, I want to get rid of autocracy. I want to get rid of the corrupt landed gentry and establish some sort of parliament. Or I want to God, I don't know. I want to do some sort of land reform so that the peasants can have some land.
Mhm.
There's no she never has any sort of political ideas. It's just I want to be sultan,
Yeah,
A-
that's
and
it.
and there's no reason to suppose that she would be particularly good at it because she's not particularly intelligent. She's not she's not a scholar of any sort. She doesn't seem to have any
Mhm.
particularly great ideas. So why should she be sultan? Like, she doesn't have any sort of democratic mandate. She's not the head of a political faction. So she's not, for example, the elected head of the, I don't know, the merchant class or something, and they want her to represent their political interests. No, she just wants to be sultan to be sultan. And what
Mhm.
I see when I look at someone like that is, okay, well, you basically are a power hungry maniac. You want power for its own sake. You're like a
Mhm.
politician who wants to be president, not to do anything, but just to have that power. She was a very power hungry. That was her entire motivation, and I despised that character. I hated what they did to her for that reason. She was just
Mhm.
it was just naked hunger for power, and that was it.
Mhm. It was the ultimate sort of narcissistic grab. It's like a child trying to grab a cookie from the jar and saying, "Gimme." That's the narrative equivalent of
Essentially,
all that was. Yeah.
yeah. And in the mind of Disney, they didn't have to justify this. They didn't have to justify her power grab because, well, she's a woman, so
Mhm.
she should have
And a
power.
diverse woman. And a
A
diverse
diverse,
woman as
yeah.
well.
Yeah. Oh, but apparently there was a bit of a backlash. It wasn't as big as some of the other ones, but there was a bit of a backlash on Twitter because the actress that played Jasmine was only half Indian. She was also
Oh,
half white, so she's
okay.
half European, half Indian, so not Indian enough.
Oh, so then I guess I could have played Jasmine then, because that's my background too. That's funny. I didn't
And
know that.
and um you could have played. Although I suspect you would have received a lot of backlash for not being dark skinned enough.
Probably. Probably.
Yeah, that happened actually. There was a woman who played Aretha Franklin, maybe?
Okay.
Someone like that. She played one of those old singers, and this woman was she was lighter skinned than Aretha Franklin. I think Aretha Franklin was almost entirely African blood, like almost like not much white mixed race in there, as
Right,
many
right.
African Americans have.
Mhm.
Um, and then they got a woman who was more mixed. She was like half white or something like that. And there was a massive backlash on Black Twitter. A
Hmm,
lot of people were
interesting.
accusing the filmmakers of colorism, I think they call it. And yeah, the actress actually had to come out and apologize. Now the movie was a complete disaster. It didn't make any money, and it was apparently absolutely terrible. But yeah, there was a big controversy about it, and I just thought it was so pathetic. Like that, these people will never be happy. Never. It's like
No.
they want the exact representation of the real person to play the real person. It's like they won't be happy until basically everybody is playing themselves on screen. Anyone who diverts even slightly from the immutable characteristics of the real person being presented on screen is that's unacceptable to these idiots who are
But
always
yeah,
making
yeah,
noise online.
yeah, but they have no issue with race swapping historical
Oh
figures
yeah,
like Anne Boleyn or Queen Cleopatra
yeah.
or
They're only angry
anyone like
when
that.
yeah, and it's okay to race swap if the character's white. That's fine. You can race swap, no problem.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
just representation. And what are
Exactly,
you even
exactly.
talking about it for? Why are you even talking about it? What are you racist? Why are you bringing it up? Why are you bringing it up?
Exactly.
What's your problem?
If you notice it, you're suddenly a racist, and if you everybody bow down essentially, which was the whole nonsense of the Cleopatra show. Good God! Although I will have to say I do have a soft spot for that show because that sort of got my channel got my channel noticed just a little bit. So so I think
Yeah.
I'll always have a little bit of a soft spot for it. But good Lord, what a slog! What
Yeah,
can I say?
that was such a garbage show.
Hmm.
I mean, we could go on about the Marvels, but the thing has been fairly thoroughly examined. Just in the aftermath of the Marvels disaster, how do you
Hmm.
think? I mean, who knows how Marvel will react to it? It seems that the writer's strike came at a good time for them because they've basically been able to put everything on ice, and they're only going to release one movie this year,
Thank
Deadpool
God.
3. And
Thank God.
I don't know if they're going to change anything. I've heard that they're still going to go for the Young Avengers, so they're going to have the young female Avengers. They're going to have female
Good luck with
Hawkeye.
that.
They're going to have Ms. Marvel, and those are the two ones that are confirmed. And they'll probably have I don't even know. I can't remember these characters' names. These third-rate female knockoffs. I can't even remember them.
Um. Okay, so they have Miss Marvel. They'll have Kate Bishop.
They could have She-Hulk. They could have Ant-Man's daughter.
Oh, oh yeah. Oh gosh, don't even get me started on her. I hated Cassie Lang.
They'll probably throw in her in there, so they'll have
Mhm.
her, and maybe that She-Hulk could make an appearance, and There's a couple of others that they could play around with, but it sounds like an absolute, if they're going to go with that, like that's just a disaster waiting to happen.
No, I agree, and it would probably lead to amount to a financial disaster similar to that of the Marvels, or maybe more so in that case because at least the Marvels had Iman Vellani. No one in that female Avengers show would be likable at all. So there would be absolutely no redeeming factors, and if there's no redeeming factors, well, then there's no reason to watch the show or the film rather.
Yeah, I mean, how do you think Marvel should react to? Because look, there are times, and there's things that we can compare this to. So there are massive culture shocks in the cinematic landscape. If you go back through history, you will see movies that came out and they were a big shock because they failed as badly as they did, and then that led to a sea change in cinema culture and the kind of movies that studios made. So we'll give two examples. One is oh man, the name escapes me. It was released, I think, in 1980.
Mhm.
Oh, can't remember it. But it was a big cowboy movie. It was a big Heaven's Gate. Is that what it was? That what
Okay.
it's called? Heaven's Gate. Do you know what I'm talking
Okay.
about? It was a 1980
No.
movie. It was a 1980s movie. It was in the vein of these big cowboy sort of Western epics, and they'd
Mhm.
done quite well. They'd been quite popular, and for a while, super expensive, big budget movies, big epics. It was called Heaven's Gate, and it
Yeah.
was a complete calamity, total box office
Okay.
calamity, and it led to
Mhm.
the end of those big epic movies, like the movies like Ben-Hur or the big sprawling cowboy epics. That was the last death knell of the cowboy movie and the big kind of wide open prairie epic type thing. And so audiences didn't want that anymore. And then you had the whole action explosion in the 80s. And then in
Right.
1990, there was a movie in 1990 which was quite similar. It was in the same vein as Top Gun. It was a very 80s movie.
Mhm.
And what was it called? It had Tom Cruise in it. Give me
Oh
a
gosh, he's
second.
been in everything.
Hard to
Uh,
remember the names of these flops. Um, it was a
oh
movie. It was a
gosh.
racing car movie. I just can't remember what it was called.
Not Speed. No, that's something else. Um, darn. I can't remember
Days
off
of
the top of my
Thunder.
head.
Days of Thunder.
Oh,
It's called
there
Days
we
of
go.
Thunder.
Okay. Mhm.
So you had Heaven's Gate in 1980. That was a massive flop, and that changed. People stopped making those kind of movies, and then they moved into action. And then Days of Thunder, which was supposed to
Mhm.
be kind of a Top Gun type movie. Like it had all the 80s elements. It had the really cool pop songs playing, and it had the guy riding a dangerous vehicle, and
Mhm.
it had the love interest, and it had Tom Cruise running around looking like a hot young guy. And that was a disaster financially, and that sort of brought that 80s era to a crashing halt. And that was in 1990, and then you got the softer kind of stuff in the 90s, like
Mhm.
Philadelphia
Yeah.
and stuff like that. Even if you look
All
at
those
animated like
rom-coms.
Toy Story, yeah,
Mhm.
rom-coms, things like that. In fact, that was the era of the snag, the sensitive new age guy. You think
Didn't
Tom
know the name
Hanks?
for it. Cool.
Yeah, it has a
Yeah.
name for it. Like Tom Hanks was one of them. There was a bunch of others, like those snag type actors. There was Hugh Grant was one. Are you
Okay,
familiar
yeah,
with
I can
him?
see that. Yep, I
Hugh
am.
Grant was a snag. He was a British snag. So that was
Mhm.
the sort of macho 80s guy was over, and then it was the age of the snag and the softer movies. And I think the Marvels is one of those. Marvel need to treat the Marvels as a Heaven's Gate or a Days of Thunder. They need to say, okay, audiences aren't interested in this shite anymore. We need to do a complete massive sea change if we're going to stay relevant, or we're going to go the way of, we're going to be an 80s action movie in 1993.
Right.
And
No,
it's
I
how should Marvel respond to this calamity?
well, one, I think a formal apology would be
Hmm.
a great start, especially after everything they've said and done to fans, how they raked fans over the coals and called them ists and phobes and every other uh, preposition, I guess, under the sun. A public apology would be a great way to start, and
It would be a
then
good way to start.
yeah, and then table every project for the next 3 years at least. While they go back to the drawing board and figure out where they went wrong after Endgame, because there, other than a few gems in Phase 4, No Way Home,
Hmm.
and I don't know how people typically receive this show, but I really did like Moon Knight. Other than those things, um, it's been kind of a flop since 2019, and that's really really sad because as of in that year, I would never have imagined saying those sort of things because I was the biggest superhero movie fan ever at the time.
Hmm.
So I think a public apology would be the best way to start, from Kevin Feige to all of the fans who have made this movie franchise such a success over the years, and then a declaration that they're going to table all of their projects for the next 3 years at least, go back to the drawing board, and maybe redo Phase Four, and then start with the Fantastic Four,
Yeah.
because I think that's they bought the rights to Fox, they own those characters again. Why would you not start with Marvel's first family and then do a very nuanced version of Susan Storm and Johnny and Mr. Fantastic, and then go forward from there. If you want to recast the X-Men, that's fine too. I have no issues with that, but start with the Fantastic Four after you've taken those steps, because that is the only way I can see this sort of getting resolved. And people are just, I think, people have been saying, is it bad writing or is it superhero fatigue? To be honest with you, I think it's kind of a combination of both, but one fuels the other. Bad
Yeah.
writing will fuel superhero fatigue.
Yeah.
And so because we've had such bad stuff, people are tired. We're tired of such
Hmm.
bad products. Um, so get rid of all that. Let's have a break and let some maybe release a lot of indie films in the next couple of years that are just unique and don't have nearly as much studio interference. And as soon as that happens, well, I think you might get slowly start to get some of the fans' goodwill back if that were to happen. But of course, it'll never happen.
No. No, because it's Disney, it's a corporate model, so they have to keep churning out shit.
Yep. Yep.
And there's precedent for what they could do. It's not like this is unprecedented. James Bond is a very successful franchise which has been going since the early 1960s. I think Doctor No was released in 1962, and
Mhm.
that's been going strong ever since. It's had its flops. Like James Bond has been in trouble a few times, and they have always responded. They've bounced back by just getting with the times, basically. So a good example of it is there's two really good examples. GoldenEye, that was Pierce Brosnan's first stint as Bond, and in
Mhm.
GoldenEye, they got away from the kind of the goofier and also more humorless stuff, and kind of almost like gangster action movie oriented stuff they'd been doing before, and just made it a bit more fun and humorous and sexy. But at the same time, they balanced that out. There was a big AIDS scare in the 80s, and there's actually a scene in GoldenEye where James Bond is propositioned by Fenya Jensen's character, and he says something like that depends on your definition of safe sex. So they're trying to be current. They're trying to show, okay, James Bond is current now, and we're aware of the whole AIDS thing, use a
Mhm.
condom and all that, and they're trying
Yeah.
to be relevant, and it really worked. Like bringing all these present elements and responding to the culture, which is what Bond did. That worked really well with the Pierce Brosnan movie with GoldenEye. GoldenEye was a big hit, and then
Mhm.
when they did Daniel Craig, now I don't really like Daniel Craig as a Bond. I think he's a bit humorless, but I still think he was a decent Bond, and I think he was the right Bond at the time because Bourne had become very popular, and like the crazy, like batshit insane last Bond movie, Die Another Day, had been heavily criticized. So then they brought it back, and it was really grounded. And one of the first fight scenes they had in the first
Mhm.
Daniel Craig movie, Casino Royale, was him fighting a guy in a toilet, and that was they were sending the message like this is what Bond is now. It's really physical, dark, gritty stuff, and it
Mhm.
worked very well. So Bond has always been good at responding to the culture. What Marvel need to do is they need to take a lesson from what the James Bond studio has been doing for decades. They can't impose their worldview on the culture. They must respond to what the audience wants, and they must respond to how culture has changed. And like you said, screaming istophobe at the audience and telling them to go see a movie with three women in it because vagina, that's not good enough anymore. You've
Mhm.
got to get with the times and change, because this shit is getting really it's beginning to look passe and old fashioned even at this stage.
Yeah.
It's so thoroughly played out, all this girl
And
boss shit.
it's the strangest business model I've ever heard. What money are you going to make if you're insulting your audience
Yeah.
constantly? You're just going to
Well,
alienate yourself from them.
yeah.
And ESG, I don't know enough about this to make a complete comment on it, but ESG money is not going to bail you out forever. The
No, it's not. I
goodwill
mean,
of the fans will. Hmm.
ESG it's just a credit line. It allows companies to have enough money in the account to pay everybody at the end
Hmm.
of the month,
Hmm.
but it's not revenue and it's not profit,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
it can't keep going on forever. And look, these big companies like BlackRock, they'll provide the ESG money, but people who have their money in BlackRock, eventually they're going to, money talks, right? And the people that have their money in these big companies and the people that have their money in Disney, and this is happening already, they're turning around and saying, look, I am sick of this shite and sick of this ESG stuff. Stop putting my money in this crap. I want to make money. I don't care about your bloody propaganda or your ideology. I just want to make money. And if you're not going to do that, I will take my money elsewhere. Eventually, and it's going to take a while, and there's going to be other problems. Like, it's not, people often say, well, when's Hollywood going to de-wokeify? It's not going to happen anytime soon, because even if you do solve ESG, you have another problem coming up the pipeline, and it's becoming a massive problem, and it's DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, hiring people on the basis, and it's becoming a massive problem. And I actually think the Marvels is one of the first like massive calamities that was caused in large part by DEI. So the director, for example, Nia DaCosta, wasn't like not even close to qualified. She had two crappy, poorly received indie movies behind her, low budget trash, basically message movies that are about the Black experience. One of those movies, and she had only done two of those, and then they gave her the Marvels. Like that's DEI. Like that's one of the reasons that the movie was as bad as it was. It was always going to flop, but it might be the biggest box office bomb of all time. It's either the biggest or the second biggest, and that's what happens. I mean, it's even happened in the airline industry. Eventually, a plane's going to fall out of the sky, and you're going to discover that the pilot was an unqualified person of color who was hired on the basis of immutable characteristics. And to me, the Marvels is like the cinematic equivalent of that great plane crash that is coming.
No, I agree, but there's still going to be those people who have enough power to cover up the problem. I don't know how long that's going to last for, or if at some point somebody at the top is going to finally say we're going to need to go full scorched earth on this issue because we're not going to make any money until it's resolved. And we've basically lost our cash cow in the fans because of it. And I honestly don't know when it's going to end and how we solve this problem and who is going to need to be courageous enough to step up and end it. We don't really have anyone like that in the entertainment industry these days. No, I can pay certain give certain accolades to Tom Cruise for not wanting to include any of that stuff in his movies, but he basically owns Paramount Studios at this point anyway. So, I mean, as long as he keeps bringing quality action films, well, at least we'll have a few good things to watch. But at the same time, I don't know, maybe I'm just greedy. Maybe that's not enough for me. I would like a film industry where actors are getting their work based on merit rather than skin color or pigmentation. I'd like to see interesting stories that have nothing to do with diversity hires or equity or inclusion. And I don't know if we're going to get that back.
Well, I mean, even if they do get rid of the overt, like really overt in-your-face messaging, and I do think Hollywood are beginning to move away from that a little bit. Disney least of all. But for example, I think Netflix have, by and large, that they reversed course reasonably successfully. They still do garbage like Cleopatra, but then they were able to do One Piece. Like Disney couldn't do One Piece. There's no way. One Piece wouldn't survive a Disney adaptation. It would just come out complete trash, and Nami, you know, the girl with orange hair, she would be the hero, and she'd probably have to be the captain because she's a woman. It would be fucking awful. So they but Netflix can do that, and even Apple are doing some good stuff. Amazon, who made Rings of Power, they also did make they made Air, which is pretty good. So there's some studios, Disney aren't one of them. There's some studios who are moving away from the CSG stuff, but the next problem is going to be the competence crisis. So even if you don't have the overt messaging, it'll just, everything will suck because the CGI is being done by people who aren't properly qualified, who were moved up the ladder because, I don't know, she's a Black woman or a Latino lesbian or something. Or you will have, this is apparently becoming a problem in animation as well. Like Chris Gore, his channel Film Threat have been doing this thing called the D-Files, where they've been talking about all of this information coming out of the movie industry, particularly Disney. And one of the things they've talked about is that the Writers Guild have gone full woke, full DEI, and agents, they've heard from white male screenwriters whose agents have told them, we can't get you in an audition. I don't know. I'm not sure what the term is for an audition for a writer. It's called an open reading, I think, or something like that, an open script. It's like an audition for a screenwriter. And they've been told flat out, we can't get you an audition as a writer because you're a white male writer. And what you're going to end up with is a competence crisis. Wish, that animation movie from Disney.
Oh gosh, yeah, that
there are specific reasons it was as bad as it was. And like I said, Film Center going into all that, but it's because of basically firing all the really competent white male animators and the guys that were involved, the directors and so forth, and bringing in these people that aren't properly qualified. And that's going to be a massive problem. I don't think Hollywood's going to get any better. I mean, it might get a little bit less woke in terms of the messaging, but the quality's not going up. If anything, it's going down, if that's possible.
Yeah. Well, I didn't think it would be possible either until I saw Echo, and then I realized no, we can. There's a sub level that we've currently crashed into, and we're here right now.
I mean, Echo's something else. So moving on to 5 worst Marvel characters.
Oh, good Lord!
So
we're gonna be here all night.
I'm gonna. So I thought I'll just do this for a bit of fun.
Sure.
And I'll read out mine here.
Okay.
So where are my 5 worst characters? So number 5. I'm going to give Dar-Ben an honorable mention, by the way. That's the villain in the Marvels. She gets an honorable mention. She's terrible. She's a terrible character. I'll give her an honorable mention. She's not in the top 5 for me because she's just not enough of a character. She's so generic and forgettable. And shit. And the movie's terrible anyway, so it's not like she's really ruining anything. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
I just don't care enough about her to get her in there. But she's the worst villain. Actress is absolutely awful. And she doesn't even make sense. But I'm not even going to go into it. Anyway, so I've got number 5. I've got She-Hulk. Who I just cannot stand that woman. Jen, she's feminism. She is feminism. She's like a physical manifestation of feminism. She wants all of the benefits of being a woman and none of the responsibility.
Exactly.
I absolutely cannot stand her. But at the same time, she wants victimhood status. She's kind of like Schrodinger's feminism. She's a victim, but she's simultaneously empowered. She's oppressed by the patriarchy, but she expects to get promotions. I can't stand her. She's just awful. But at the same time, I think the actress did a pretty good job with her. Like, if that's possible, the actress gave us the best possible iteration of that awful character. And
fair enough.
That does help a little bit. Next, number 4, I've got Malekith from Thor: The Dark World. And I thought Malekith was just an absolute... He's the perfect... If someone says, well, what do you mean by nothing burger? If I say that character's a nothing burger and someone said, what do you mean? Define that. I would say, watch Thor: The Dark World. Malekith is a nothing burger. He's a character with no real motivation. He has no character. He's so boring. He has this one single facial expression. You feel absolutely nothing for him. He doesn't elicit any sort of cognitive effect in the viewer. He's a nothing burger. He's an absolutely terrible villain. He was, for me, the worst Marvel villain until Dar-Ben.
Yeah.
He's just a nothing. And there was some potential in the Thor: The Dark World. I think if they'd got a really good villain with some interesting psychology and philosophy and ideas, that could have been a decent movie. That was a terrible movie. Then number 3 is Ant-Man's daughter, who's just insufferable, just an ungrateful wee brat. Number 2 is Riri Williams, because I despise her with a bloody passion. Like, the first thing we see her do in Wakanda Forever is blow up a police cordon. Like, she gets into her suit and she flies over she gets into your suit and she flies over a police cordon, and the police cordon are trying to block these Wakandan women from fleeing the scene. And Riri Williams just blows it up. She destroys 2 police cars. And there's the police right there next to it. And I think the movie kind of shows the police diving away so they don't die. But at the same time, well, she didn't know what they were going to do. So essentially, one of the first things she does on screen, her first big action sequence, she tries to murder a bunch of cops. And you want me to consider this absolute scumbag who tries to murder first responders a hero? I just despise her. I hate her so much. And that's without her annoying personality, her annoying, sassy, arrogant, entitled personality. I hate Riri Williams. And for me,
she was never a likable character in the comics either.
No, she's so unlikable. She's just so charmless. She's not charming at all. And she's not a good screen presence. And the actress has no charisma. Oh, I hate it. And for me, number 1 was Echo. I just thought Echo was abysmal. Absolutely awful. A mass murderer masquerading as a hero. I despise Echo. Anyway, what about you? What were your picks?
Well, let's see. I think Captain Marvel, obviously, for obvious reasons, would have to be one of them. And I made a video about this, about how she's a bit of a failure as a hero, a while back. She's I think I could sort of see what they were trying to do with her. They wanted to create a Wonder Woman type character, but I don't think Captain Marvel should even be mentioned in the same sentence as Wonder Woman, because I love Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
She's one of those characters who is, I guess, static completely throughout her whole first movie, and the arc of that movie was, I'm perfect the way way I am, and I always
Mhm.
have been. The movie is just me realizing it. We're coming into that realization that I am the best version of myself, and now I know it, and now everybody needs to know it. That's essentially why or one of the reasons why she's a bit of a failure as a hero. That, and she's committed atrocities that she never answered for. I said, well, no matter how illogical it is, her blowing up the supreme intelligence, I guess, or whatever it was in the Marvels, she still ended up condemning an entire civilization to a slow death by toxic air, lack of sun, no water, and and yeah, and of course, the way she manages to fix the problem she created is by flying into that same planet to regenerate the sun, for lack of a better word. So she could have done that 30 plus years ago and then gone back to see Monica, but for some reason she just didn't think of it at the time, and she's been flying around in space for the last 30 years. Doing what?
Playing with her
Doing
cat.
what? Playing with her cat. There you go, playing with her cats. So she's one of those heroes that was a complete failure from beginning to end. So she's quite one of the worst for me. And then, oh gosh, there's so many to choose from. Gore. Gore is another one. He was one of those villains that could have been absolutely outstanding. He had the potential, I think, to be another Thanos. But like I mentioned earlier, they absolutely ruined his character with the accountability being taken away and placed upon a sentient sword, for example. I have nothing against Christian Bale. I just don't think this was the right role for him. He might have been able to pull it off. Then again, I can blame the writers to Kingdom Come on the way that they ended up writing his character. I think he could have been so good, and I was so disappointed with how tame they made him seem, and how lifeless and dull and completely unnuanced they made him. So he's another one. I think he's number. No, I don't even know what number I'd put him in, to be honest with you. Maybe he's number 5. And another one. That's, what is that so far? 2? Yes. Okay. Another one. Sylvie. Yeah, Sylvie from the Loki
Tell us
show.
about Sylvie. Tell us about Sylvie.
Oh
Because
my
you
word.
did a video on her, and it's one of my favorite videos you've done. Like, I
Oh
can
really? Okay.
feel, yeah, I can feel like, so if everybody watch NerdWord's video on Loki season 1, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I
She
think it
the
was
way she
the
talks, it's
devaluation of Loki.
funny.
Yeah.
It's funny listening to you talk about Sylvie, because you can feel the hatred like bleeding through the video. It's great.
hmm Yeah. She's another one of those characters that oh dear God. As soon as she came on screen, I wanted to know. I thought to myself, this is going to be a female Loki. This is a female Loki. Tom Hiddleston gave us the absolute best version of this character in the Avengers movie. He was charming. He was sadistic. He was unrepentant. He was ruthless and all those things. And he was a nuanced character. He was the first big villain that we got in the MCU that I actually really liked. The others were just kind of plot devices to drive the story forward, but he was the best of the best so far, right up until I think towards the end of Phase 3, to be honest. And so they give him this female who's supposed to be a reflection of him, but they decide they don't want her to be him, so they give her another name, and then they the whole reason for her being angry is because she wanted to be or angry at the TVA is for her wanting to be a Valkyrie, and then them realizing that, oh, she's deviating from her path, she needs to be taken out. That is the whole basis of her character. And they tried to course correct there at the end when they're facing Kang the Conqueror, when he calls her a murderer and tells her to get over herself, and I was like, yes, finally someone said it. But then it completely vanishes in the next 5 minutes when she decides to get her way by stabbing him and rendering his murder prognosis accurate, and then also making Kang the stupidest villain ever. So they decided to blow up two characters with that one scene alone. And she taught herself her magic. She taught herself all the magic that she knows and is apparently better at Loki than Loki, who's been training with his mother since he was knee high to a grasshopper. And she just suddenly knows all of it. I can't stand characters who get to a certain level in their careers or their life or their abilities, and when you ask them why how they got here or why they are the way they are, they'll say, "Oh, I taught myself." I beg your
Yeah,
pardon?
that doesn't
It
really
doesn't
make
work that
sense.
way.
That's like me saying I taught myself French. It doesn't make any sense. Like I can learn it from books and um, conversations with French people and like, but I taught myself like, from what?
Well, exactly. And the fact of the matter is you can't teach yourself anything to be perfect in anything because you were not a master starting out. There's going to be imperfections and holes in your training. And to do that would be to assume that you are perfect already. And you're not. You're not. So the fact that they decided to make her this character that was totally self-sufficient in everything that she did and perfect in that self-sufficiency grinds my gears. So she's one of those characters I absolutely, absolutely, absolutely hate with a passion. And then another one, this kind of pains me to say, to be honest, because I used to love her so much. Wanda Maximoff, Scarlet Witch. I used to absolutely love her character.
You only say
And I
that
felt
because you don't know what she has sacrificed.
no, I don't. I don't, unfortunately. She used to be awesome. I really liked the whole started off as a villain with her brother Pietro um working for Ultron, and then slowly becoming an Avenger and trying to redeem herself. And her powers were really, really insane. She was one of those characters who we didn't really understand the depths of what she could do, and slowly began to understand as each film and each television series came along. But then WandaVision came, and it all sort of fell off a cliff. Now, I love Elizabeth Olsen; she's ridiculously charming, and I'd watch anything she's in. But the fact that they decided that Photon, the character of Photon, ironically enough, defended her by saying she chose to protect me or whatever. She's and then Tyler, what's his name? Tyler something. The lead guy at Sword says that she's
Tyler
keeping
Durden.
thousands of people. That's the one. Keeping not quite, but you know what I mean. She's keeping thousands of people hostage, and Monica says, and it could be thousands more if she hadn't set up her own quarantine or whatever. And I'm like, crickets in the background, because I thought to myself, I beg your pardon. So we're not justifying murder and mind enslavement. We're just saying, oh, it could be worse than it actually is. We should be happy that it's only this level of bad and no further. What?
Yeah, I
What?
mean, I haven't seen. I do mean to watch that show. It's there's a list a mile long of absolute garbage that I have to watch, as just for my
Hmm.
channel, and
Hmm.
yeah, I just haven't gotten around to that one yet.
Ugh. Ugh. And she was just so good. I really, really liked her. And then another one, I think that I that it might be a little bit of an odd pick, but Doctor Strange.
Interesting.
I
That
think
is that is. I like that. Why would you pick
he's a
him?
well, when his first movie came out in 2016, the trailers had dropped for it, and I thought to myself, this is going to be wilder and wackier than anything Marvel's done before. It's one of those movies that is just sort of it's a risk because everything they'd done up until 2016 was really grounded in reality. They hadn't really done a ton of stuff with magic before, and this was the first film that was going to be all about magic and based in a reality that we didn't really understand. And it was one of those obscure characters that was they were bringing to life back when I liked obscure characters getting their own shows and movies. Um, and so I thought to myself, okay, this looks awesome. Benedict Cumberbatch is playing him. This is going to be great. And when I walked out of the movie, I really wanted to like it, but I was also like, that wasn't as good as I thought it could have been. Also, they totally underused Mads Mikkelsen, and he's a fantastic actor. They totally underused him in Indiana Jones as well, but that's a whole other can of worms. Um, and it was one of those movies that it was almost like a bait and switch. The trailer was so dark and it was so gritty and very very eerie almost. And then we get to the film and it's humorous where it doesn't need to be. It's
Hmm.
light where it doesn't need to be. There were far too many jokes in it that just didn't need to exist. And I walked out of the theater disappointed because I thought, okay, we you I can see where you were trying to reach for a good film, but it just it wasn't there. And it was the lost potential, I think, that
Hmm.
drives me crazy about this character. And then there's a trademark Marvel humor that's always injected into Doctor Strange that I can't stand. That I can't
Yeah.
stand. It's one of the reasons why I stopped myself from watching Multiverse of Madness because it did not look like something that I'd be interested in. He's one of those characters that has just been so Disneyfied that I don't think there's any redeeming qualities to him, which is a shame because again, he could have been so good. It's the lost potential for me, to be honest.
Yeah.
And I think that's
All
everything.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a good list. So we'll talk. I do want to talk about one of these good movies. So did you watch Tetris or Air?
Yeah, I watched both of them actually.
All right. Which one
Yeah.
did you? Which do you think was the better movie?
Okay. Better is a bit of a relative term, I think, in this case. The one I enjoyed the most in terms of just entertainment factor would have to be Air.
Yeah.
Um, I had a feeling I wouldn't understand a lot of the gaming rights and things like that were happening with Tetris. Tetris was a bit more of a technical movie.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I think I enjoyed Air a bit more. But Matt Damon and Ben Affleck have always had some fantastic chemistry together. And so sorry, phone went off for some strange reason. Um, and I love the chemistry that Matt Damon and Ben Affleck had on screen together. Everybody was
Hmm.
just very boisterous, very passionate about what they did. It was very refreshing to see characters who actually and actors who actually understood what it takes to be in a film like this and what it takes to bring characters to life. Um, so to see that level of passion in certain character in these characters was very refreshing to see after watching the Gong Show that was Echo.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. It's total night and day because you watch something like Echo and it's so flat and dull and boring and lifeless,
Hmm.
and the actors are terrible and the characters aren't really even characters. They're props or they're caricatures. And then you watch something like Her, and the people feel real, and the actors are putting in a great performance, and it's very passionate. It's a brilliant ensemble.
Hmm.
The way they all work together on screen and they bring out the best in each other. Yet that the acting in that is excellent, and Ben Affleck's direction is really good. It's a very well directed, well thought out movie. It's not a pretentiously directed movie. Often actors, when they get a hold of a camera and start directing, they want to show off that, oh, I'm not just an actor, I can direct. A perfect example of that
Hmm.
is Maestro by Bradley
Okay.
Cooper,
Hmm.
and it's massively over directed. It's too people. I've heard people call it artistic, and yeah, sure, it's artistic in the sense that he's trying to be as arty as possible in the movie. It's almost like an art house movie, but it's so pretentious and it's so over stylized and over directed. Like there's such a thing as over direction. So I used to record music,
Hmm.
and I released a couple of albums. And
Oh, neat.
a problem with a lot of modern music is overproduction. And overproduction means there's just too much going on. Like this song could be done properly with a guitar, a voice, and a keyboard. That would be nice. It's a nice, simple song. Let's just keep the arrangement nice and simple. But no, you'll get a producer in there who wants to have a chorus and who wants to have, 16 different guitar tracks on it, and he wants to have three different drums. He wants to have one live set of drums, and then he wants to have two programmed sets of drums. And it's just massively overproduced. It's like, Jesus, man, just let the song breathe. Let us hear
Hmm.
the song, get all the shit out of it. And it's the same thing with Maestro. Maestro is a massively over-directed movie. But you look at something like Air, and Ben Affleck does as much as he needs to do. There's restraint there as well as a director,
Yes. Hmm.
and it's a very good looking, well made, well paced movie, and it's very very clever as well. So, for example, there's a scene where Matt Damon is the main guy working at Nike, and he's trying to sign Michael Jordan and get him to sign on with Nike,
Hmm.
and he's going all in on this. He's using their entire budget, their entire
Yeah.
sponsorship budget to get Michael Jordan. He has made the decision, we're not going to go after three guys, we're just going to go after Michael Jordan and give him the entire sponsorship budget. It's a big
Hmm.
gamble.
Hmm.
And there's a scene early in the movie, and it's reverse foreshadowing. So Matt Damon goes into Vegas and he bets on basketball games, and he wins a lot of money because he knows his basketball, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then he goes over to the crap tables and he takes his chips and he put it all on 6, and he loses all the money he
Mhm.
just won. And the
Mhm.
point it's making is this guy knows basketball really well, but he's also a gambler, and he's willing to he takes big risks. And in terms of the craps table, he loses. And that's a kind of reverse foreshadowing because he knows his basketball really well enough to know that Michael Jordan is something special. Like he's
Mhm.
different, he's special. So he knows that, but is his gamble going to pay off? And then with the reverse craps table, the reverse shadowing is it suggests that it's going to be a failure, but actually it ends up succeeding. Really little clever things like that I
Mhm.
thought were very nice.
Mhm.
It's nice to see that in a movie
Mhm.
whereby by going into a casino and doing some gambling, there's a lot of characterization there. It's subliminal, but it really helps to flesh out the character. And you compare that to shite, like whatever Marvel are doing, or Loki season 1, where Loki turns around and goes, "You're amazing," to Sylvie. Like that's Disney's equivalent of characterization. Have the characters on
Yeah.
screen tell the audience how amazing they are. So I like her because it respects the audience's intelligence. It trusts the viewer to pick up on these things, and it's not screaming it in their face. So I
Mhm.
really enjoyed that. It's also the kind of movie that could easily be terrible.
True. Yeah. It could be one of those films that would just it was gets bogged down in technicalities and could have been very, very boring. But I do feel like it moved. It was one of those things that I appreciate Matt Damon's character in it because he was a bit of a darer. You don't see
Hmm.
a lot of, and that's I was looking for parallels between this one and Tetris, and I thought to myself, geez, both of these characters, Hank and Sonny, they're both very people who took a lot of risks, both with their personal safety and professionally speaking. And of course, the risks ended up paying off. But it's refreshing to see characters who aren't afraid, in or
Yeah,
they're just or their ambition is bigger than their fear, especially
their
with when
ambition's bigger than
especially
their
if they're
fear. I
going
like
into the
that.
U.S. Yeah, yeah, their ambition is
Yes.
bigger than their fear. And nowadays, you just have characters who just have ambition, but mindless ambition, and they don't feel things like fear anymore. So I really appreciated that about those two characters. They were willing to dare and risk a lot of stuff to be able to make it as a success in the businesses that they currently reside in. Um, so that was very refreshing to see as well. And they're extremely passionate too. It was nice to
Yeah,
see
I
that.
love I love the passion. I love the feeling of passion, and I like those movies as well because it presents male ambition in a positive light, like the positive
Hmm.
effect of strong male
Hmm.
ambition to go out in the world and to conquer.
Hmm.
In this case, it has all these positive effects, and it shows
Exactly.
men just being men, like wanting to go out in the world and succeed and make money. And I like the fact
Hmm.
that that is being glorified on string because I think it's a good thing going out and building something and making some money in the right way. It's a beautiful thing.
Hmm. Hmm. And I think one of my favorite parts of Air was when they're staying over at the office for the weekend. And I can't
Oh
remember
yeah,
what the other guy's name, but he was talking about his daughter, um, and uh, and how big of a gamble they were taking, and how he only got to see her on Sundays, I think it was, and how he kind of bribed her with the shoes. Um, and I guess I don't know. He's talking to Sonny about how uh, about the risks that they were taking or something like that, and Sonny says something along the lines of he really believed in her or whatever, and his other friend says, "Well, spoken like somebody who doesn't have a 7-year-old daughter." Um,
yeah, yeah.
Waiting
That
for them
was
or something
good.
like that. Mhm. It was just really, really good.
It was doing a lot of things there, so that scene wasn't. It was giving stakes to
Mhm.
the whole we
Mhm.
need Michael Jordan thing. Like if we don't get him, then our basketball division isn't fit for purpose. People are going to get fired, and this guy might not be able to even see his daughter because he's going to be broke, right? He's not going to be
Pretty
working in
much.
this job, and he's not going to be able to bribe her with the Nike shoes anymore. Although he does say, "Look, I would still buy them just to see her." But
Mhm.
it also
Mhm.
builds his character, like this guy who's kind of on the side, and you don't really notice him until this scene. It builds his character, and
Mhm.
it's also very heartfelt. It's a real story. It's a real American story that, and not just American, like a real story that affects a lot of men today. Like they are in that position whereby they're only seeing
Mhm.
their kids at the weekend, and here is
Mhm.
this story, albeit briefly, but it's showing up on screen. And it is nice to see movies telling real stories from today rather than all this fake manufactured shit that Disney are putting out.
No, I agree. I agree. It's nice to see the
Um,
humanity aspect of all this. Mhm. Mhm.
so our last topic is going to be what is wrong with female characters today? And I don't want this to be too much of a loaded question, so I've got a bunch of examples here. And I'll front load this just by saying, okay, there are not all female characters today are bad. There are still some good female characters. So Nami in One Piece, I thought was a very good character. She felt real. She had good motivation. She had real problems. That was my favorite TV show of the year, One Piece. And there was a movie called The Creator that had two female characters. One was a little girl who was quite charming, and then there was a love interest. And I thought she was great. She was a very charming love interest, and it was quite a nice love story. Although The Creator has serious problems, but I thought the characters were quite nice. Yeah, although I don't think much of Denzel Washington's son as an actor, to be perfectly honest.
I was a
all
son.
right,
Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So now I'm going to read a bunch of modern female characters so that there's a specific type of modern female character that is just insufferable. So here's a list I've compiled. Galadriel from Rings of Power, Rey Palpatine, Reva she was the lead character in the Obi-Wan Kenobi show.
Kenobi. Yeah. Oh, dear God.
The green one from Ahsoka. I can't remember her name, but she's fucking insufferable. Sabine
Hera?
Wren.
Is that her name?
I thought maybe, but she's the green one, and she's a real sort of boss bitch. I can't stand her. Sabine Wren, who is just a typical annoying girl boss. Wendy from Peter Pan and Wendy, she was awful. Cassie Lang, Ant-Man's daughter.
Yep.
Captain Marvel, Riri Williams, Helena Shaw from Indiana Jones. That's Phoebe Waller-Bridge's character in Indiana Jones. Even Gamora, like people really liked Guardians 3.
Oh gosh,
Gamora was such a bitch
in
that movie. I hated her.
Awful.
Like they destroyed her character in Guardians 3.
She was awful.
Guardians 3, it's a decent movie, but I thought the music was really bad. It was really out of place, and I hated Gamora in it. And that movie had other problems too. Then
I loved the villain in that one.
The villain was great.
Yeah, the High Inquisitor was fantastic. He was fantastic. They should have utilized him in I don't know, made him the big bad for Phase 4 or something, because he would have been
a hell of a lot better than Jonathan Majors Kang. Any woman from The Witcher and any woman from Wheel of Time. Basically, any big fantasy series now, the women are all they're all Galadriel from Rings of Power. Any woman from the last two Terminator movies, absolutely insufferable. The wee half-pint Latina who was brought in to replace John Connor is a hilarious example of a field girl boss. Queen Cleopatra.
Yep.
Fire Girl in Elemental. The adorable princess from Wish and Barbie. These are just horrible characters. Like, what the hell is happening with female characters?
If I were to give a treatise on that, we'd be here until tomorrow at the very least.
I know. I know.
I will say, though, I think that a lot of the reason why female characters are so bad is that there exists a certain jealousy between the writers who write these characters for their male counterparts to a certain extent. They look at the accomplishments of all these men, the daring acts and the feats of bravery and strength and or courage, and then think to themselves, well, there isn't enough of us doing those sorts of things, so the only way for us to do that is to diminish these accomplishments of men, because they're not creative enough to go out and do these things for themselves. They're not creative enough to make their own stories and to create female characters that are believable. So let's diminish the accomplishments of these men. Let's emasculate them. Let's tear them down. Let's do whatever we can to diminish their successes, their accomplishments, and their contributions to society or to storytelling in any meaningful way. And let's, as soon as they're as broken as they can be, we'll replace them with our own bootleg versions, and people will be happy with it. So it's jealousy. Yeah. Jealousy is one. Yeah.
And they felt that this was, in their minds, they were making franchises for women by doing this. So with Star Wars, and that's a great way of putting it, bootleg versions. We're going to have Rey, and she'll just be a knockoff Luke Skywalker, basically, except with none of the weaknesses. And you did every single Marvel character, every single male Marvel character who survived Endgame has been replaced by a female version of himself, just a knockoff who is, first of all, made to look good in comparison, and then is elevated.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they tried it with Indiana Jones. Helena Shaw was originally intended to be the next Indiana Jones. In fact, the original ending, which I think Bob Iger forced Kathleen Kennedy to scrap and reshoot,
Was her picking up his
Um,
hat and putting it on his
she
head.
picked up
Yeah.
his hat, put it on her head, and then there was a montage. As the credits were rolling, the montage would be her recreating all of the classic indie action scenes as if she had gone and done all of these things.
Good Lord.
So
Good
that was the
Lord.
original intention, but that's still in the movie. Like, I did a video on Indiana Jones, and there's a section
Mhm.
in which I explain that Helena Shaw is basically just a female version of Indiana Jones. They take all of his character traits from all of his movies and they cram it into her in that one movie, along with all the toxic shit they included, and
Mhm.
that's their female Indiana Jones.
Yeah. Good Lord. And I mentioned this in a video I did a while back. I like The Last Crusade is one of my most favorite films of all time. It's one of the best films I think I've ever seen. I watched it so much as a kid growing up. The chemistry between Indy and his father is one of the greatest things ever.
I love that.
Harrison Ford and
Love
Sean
that.
Connery play off each other so well. I could watch that film over and over and over again and not get bored of it. It had a female character in it who was a villain, and that I actually really liked. She used her feminine wiles against Indy. She was very intelligent in her own regard. She didn't really I'm not really sure how to describe the end of it. She still had an element of humanity in her when it came to that scene in the desert where the Brotherhood was hunting the Nazis or whatever, and
Mhm.
some of them were shot. So there's an element of humanity to her character that I really like that they kept in there. But at the same time, it wasn't enough to save her in the end. She ended up dying because she viewed the Holy Grail as a prize and not as the divine thing that it was. And even more so in that movie, I think my favorite things were the relationship between Indy and his father was very poignant. They were estranged for years, and then they sort of came back together, and their love for each other was on full display. And I don't see enough movies these days where they talk about the relationships between fathers and sons and how important those things are. And I desperately want to see more of them because I think it's so needed in the entertainment industry right now
It
because
is, yeah.
fathers are either deadbeat or they're just not existent. And every female character these days is blaming the male father figures in her life, which happened in Dial of Destiny, for not being present, even when those male characters didn't have a sort of responsibility to them in the first place. Everyone's blaming their dads, everyone's blaming their uncles, everyone's blaming their male family members because every single one of their problems because they are not shrewd enough, not nuanced enough to recognize that they have an accountability level to themselves. No one treats themselves as if there's something that they're accountable for anymore. And it's disgusting.
It is disgusting. And
Mhm,
you're 100% right when you say, like, there's not enough father figures, there's not enough fathers in a lot of these big modern productions. And it's also reflected in the female characters. So modern women in Hollywood, they are they have been completely divorced from babies, children, and pregnancy.
mhm,
You never
mhm,
ever see this in these female characters on screen. It's almost like their female anatomy doesn't even exist. And
mhm,
it's just bizarre. They're basically just men with breasts in these modern
mhm,
movies and shows, and or even a niece like, oh no, I gotta go. This is my sister's niece or something. It's so bizarre. And then, like you said, with the relationship between father and son, it's just not there anymore. And I mean, Hollywood never shut up about how it's so important that people see themselves reflected in our movies and they need to see a reflection of themselves. It's like, what?
mhm,
This is nothing you show on screen is a realistic depiction of reality. Nothing.
mhm,
It's
mhm,
just a fantasy world that you would like to exist where everyone is an atomized individual with no real responsibility and the world is essentially their playground.
mhm,
It sucks. I mean, look at
mhm.
Helena Shaw. That's her character in Indiana Jones. She just views
Oh
the world as
gosh.
one big playground for her to play in and make money from, and everyone is either there to be useful to her or to be exploited by her, and she has no relationship to kids, children, marriage, anyone. She's a completely atomized individual. She's a disgusting character with a horrible worldview.
No, I know. And her, I guess the cream of the crop for me was when she knocked out an 80-year-old man on the beaches
Oh,
of, was it Rome or Greece? I can't remember where they were. Um, in order to drag him back to a reality in which he wasn't happy when he wanted to die, to stay there and die. Which, don't get me even started on that because that's just bonkers as it is. Um, she has no sense of empathy, no sense of compassion, no sense of understanding even of the world around her. She has no sense of the sacred. Um, even when they were going after the dial, she had absolutely no regard for its power or for what it could do or what it or all that. It was just a means to make money for her.
No,
Everything was a means to make money.
she has no moral core or
Mm,
principles.
yeah, that's probably the best way to go
It's
about it.
yeah, she's just she's a perfect example of she's like everything that is wrong with modern female characters, and
Mhm,
not only in terms of the character themselves, but in terms of their function. Like, the function of modern female characters is to tear down male characters and replace them. She's the epitome of it.
mhm,
So
mhm.
I'll finish by moving over to the super chat. So,
Okay,
um, thank you to everyone who has listened and commented. So I'm just going to read through the super chat here. So
sure.
Daniel Watcher of the Lord gave me $5. Thank you very much, Daniel Watcher. I appreciate that. Christian Delorme's Vinyl Revival says, new fan from Canada here. I discovered you mid 2023 and I find myself looking forward to seeing your videos. Say hello to Karen iPhone. Cheers.
Mhm.
Yeah, Karen iPhone. She's got some good jokes coming up for the Worst Awards, so hopefully you'll like that.
Sounds good.
Faulty interface. Popping in for a moment to donate to the victims of the Demon Galadriel Recovery Fund. Have a wonderful day. Yeah, that's going to need to be a big fund because that woman has a lot of victims. And
Mhm, and did I hear
Cavill, go ahead.
oh, sorry. Did I hear that they're wrapping up season 2 now for Rings of Power?
Mm,
I don't know how true that is, but I heard a rumor. I'm not sure. Oh gosh, if that's the case, we're in for I'm gonna have to create, like, a whole new stream of videos on this
it's going to be a
this new
feeding frenzy.
season.
I cannot wait for that Rings of Power season 2 trailer to drop. It's just going to be a feeding frenzy.
Oh
I'm
my
going to
gosh, I
love
can't
every
wait.
second.
I can't
And
wait.
I know that I'm like this YouTube vulture circulating, waiting for the carcass to drop. I don't
Oh,
care.
so am
I
I.
want my
Mhm,
carrion.
mhm, mhm. So am I.
Um, so Charles Emerson Winchester III gave me $5. And why not a gender swapped blob from the 90s X-Men, played by one of those body positive social media stars? Do you know what we need, man?
Why not?
We
Mm,
we need we need a parody. We need someone to
that'd be
do a
great.
parody movie of. Did you see that South Park episode? Put a chick in it, make her gay.
No, I didn't.
It was really good. It was a really good, very much needed parody of all this modern superhero shit and multiverse and women being made to women being brought into movies and TV shows to replace the men. And it was a parody of
Mhm.
all of that. And they had Kathleen Kennedy in it. It was really
Of
funny. It's
course.
a great episode.
Awesome.
What we need is a parody to just rip the piss out of this modern Hollywood nonsense because they don't really make parody movies anymore. But yeah, I think the culture would embrace that. Something low budget that could maybe make its money back.
No, I
Cavo
agree. That'd
says,
be great.
"Keep kicking ass, my bald brother." Thanks very much, man. I shall do so. House of Haz says, Echo is so bad that Despot's favorite movie, classic award-winning movies, She Said and Women Talking were better because at least they
Oh, good
were
lord.
talking compared to Echo's silent fart of a show. Yeah, the sign language was a problem in Echo. It often slowed it down a lot. Some of the characters were
Mhm,
signing very slowly, and man, Echo is just ASMR stuff. It's very
mhm,
hard to get through. It's very hard to get through. Very,
mhm.
very boring. James Garassa gave me $20. Thank you, James. And he said, thoughts on what is becoming of Monsterverse? Upcoming movie has a
Mhm.
female lead who now has a butch haircut. New female kaiju that is more powerful than
Oh,
Godzilla
okay.
who transitions to learner with pink atomic breath. I'm not really invested in the Monsterverse. I'm
Neither am
gonna
I.
be honest, man. I sort of think of monster movies as a little bit too silly and childish for me. I don't enjoy.
Mhm.
I haven't seen Godzilla minus one though. I
Neither am I.
do want to watch Godzilla minus one because I've heard great things about it. So I'll definitely watch that. But I'm not really big into monster movies, to be perfectly honest. RRTNZ says, fix the MCU just like Dallas. Next movie starts with Peggy Carter in the shower. She gets out and Steve's sitting there. Phase 4 and 5 was just a dream.
Yeah, there you go. That's probably the
I
best
mean,
way to go about this. Yeah.
I don't disagree that it should all just be retconned and then they should start again with the X-Men or the Fantastic Four. I think that's the best way to go after a long break.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm,
Stacey Brower gave me $5, so thank you, Stacey. Nick
mhm.
Blackledge gave me $10. Cheers to the Despot, the YouTuber who made the best call describing teenage whelps Marxist diatribe as pontificating a word salad of bollocks. Yeah, that's exactly right. And LB gave me $5 and says, love, love, love both of you. This has been amazing. So thank
Yay.
you very much, LB. So yeah, thank you to everyone who was in the chat and everyone who was kind enough to give me a tip, and thank you to everyone who watched this, and of course, thank you very much to NerdWord for
Of course,
giving
of
me
course.
her valuable time and
Not a problem.
going
Not at all.
onto the chat. So yeah, NerdWord, is there anything? Yeah, everybody should go over to NerdWord's channel, subscribe, great videos. Is there anything you
Oh,
want to?
well, I do want to say thank you as well, because I didn't notice the post that you made last night until I got up this morning and found out that I had a bunch of new subscribers. I was very shocked for a second, and and then I saw, when I looked at my subscriber count, and I'm like, what happened here? And then I saw your post, and I was like, I needed to say a very heartfelt thank you, because I'm very appreciative of that. So thank you very much.
All right. Well, yeah, I appreciate that. And yeah. All right. Thank you, everybody, and have a great day wherever you are in the world.
Thanks, everyone.